Dead Island is a scattered IP that goes through ups and downs hellaciously. I have covered the Dead Island series thrice, how you could survive the first outbreaks, the development hell of Dead Island 2, and the unsurvivability of Dead Island 2's Autophage, but something kept nagging at me as I was playing through Dead Island 2 again recently and all its DLCs. Apparently, Pathogen HK from Dead Island 1 and the Autophage from 2 were completely different viruses, but apparently that isn't the case entirely. What exactly happened between both of these points? How does every single human on the planet have the genetic predisposition to be a zombie? What was the point of the first game if it was a completely different zombie virus? How can this supposed separate zombie virus lead to stopping the extinction of man? And what do Pathogen HK and the Autophage have to do with each other? Today, we are discussing, does Dead Island 2's Autophage zombie virus make any sense?
Shrunken head, broken legs, body parts on the concrete.
Sometimes watching videos like this just makes it hard to cope with how someone can waste their time with fictional diseases. So how about we hook you up to some copium? If you need to cope with bad gaming skills, get you some copium with cranberry flavor. It tastes so good, I put it in my mouth. Yum! A delicious energy supplement you can drink thanks to Gamer Subs. You can pour it in a variety of waifu cups. Try some today with a bonus. If you use my code WOW at checkout, you can get 10% off your order. Plus, if I sell enough, I can get my own waifu cup to sell to you, and maybe make it in line with a certain infectedly witchy woman. Dead Island's original outbreak stemmed from the disease Kuru, a prion-based illness localized within the four people of Papua New Guinea. They'd ritualistically consume the body parts of their deceased loved ones in order to free their spirits and incorporate their bodies, leading to neurodegenerative effects of this shaking disease. Kuru would crop up again within the Benoi archipelago, but with more highly mutative effects, zombifying the local native tribes after their own brand of ritualistic cannibalization. As with any zombie-like disease, an organization caught wind of this and immediately thought of weaponizing it. Dubbed the Consortium, they are composed of the extremely wealthy and pull the strings behind every government, company, and org across Earth. They mobilized the cosmetic science company Geopharm to create labs across Benoi in discrete locations to run inhumane experiments and testing trials with this destructive disease. The disease cross-mutating with Kuru, HIV, rabies, and more, it would soon be called Pathogen HK, making victims almost instantly turn into cannibalistic, stark-raving zombies. The consortium was salivating at the monetary mouth as they thought of the financial gains they would make selling this disease as a bioweapon across the planet. Running these tests within islands isolated from the rest of the world would mean if an outbreak occurred, it could be quarantined and studied immensely, seeing the virus for how it ticks, reacts, and spreads, even looking into possible immunity, cures, and vaccines. Using its influence, the consortium launched a global blood drive to sift through and see any and all potential resistant candidates, discovering them and offering them an all-expense paid vacation to Benoi to subject them to a zombie outbreak for study. Over the course of the events of Dead Island 1 and Riptide, we see the immune attempt to survive it all and help fellow survivors, helping Biopharm in the hopes of a cure do they only create stronger mutagens and zombies. Due to conflicting interests of both terrorist hackers and army generals, a cure for Pathogen HK was never made, only stronger versions of the virus. Frank Serpo, an agent of the consortium, even attempted to inject the virus into biochemical weapons left over from World War II by Japanese occupation on the nearby island of Palanai. So, making a bioweapon with no countermeasure was not feasible in the near fiscal future. But the consortium's efforts at warmonger profiteering are not the root of all evil here. here. They are merely tier 2 of this conspiracy. An even greater power had been keeping them on a rather long leash, one by the name of the Eschaton, a term meaning the creation of a new heaven and earth. Long before the strain of Kuru had mutated into Pathogen HK, extensive research into human genetics were conducted by this shadow pantheon, looking to discover ways to prolong their lives and in turn their global influence. In the 1990s, molecular biologist and virologist Dr. Reuben Reed, a member of the Eschaton, had made a groundbreaking but extremely terrifying revelation about the inherent DNA in all of mankind. Everyone on Earth will hit a biological clock point triggered by what Reed referred to as the autophage, turning us all into mutative, undead cannibals, the deadline being somewhere within a decade range of the year 2160, effectively giving our entire species a little over a century left to live or die trying to stop it. Dr. Reed relayed this information to the group as they attempted to find a cure. In the midst of this research, experiments had begun with this biological foundation in mind. Dr. Reed had concocted a viral strain of the genetic code of the autophage and infected a newborn baby named Tisha at birth. Doing so would possibly allow the infection to lie dormant in her immune body in the hopes that her blood could derive a cure. But this meant Tisha would need to grow up and see how or if the infection would adversely affect her. By early 2010, rumblings of information about the new mutating variant of Kuru would reach the ears of Eschaton and Dr. Reed. This Pathogen HK was creating the undead like wildfire from a tribal culture on Banoi, and the consortium was already hot on the trails of pinning this down for nefarious purposes. The supposed undead that the autophage can create could also very well be the zombies being spoken of on these remote islands, maybe spurred quickly by this disease. All divisions under the Eschaton exhausted many resources with the zombie outbreak ravaging the archipelago. The HK zombies would eventually be exterminated, with worldwide public outcry dwindling over time, because as we know, any tragedy that happens, social media forgets it in about a week or two. But for those in the shadows, the virus would be extensively looked into for what it meant for our future. The immune that survived all of this on the two islands did have a cliffhanger ending at the end of Riptide that made it seem like the mutated form of the Pathogen HK they injected into themselves had turned them into zombies themselves, but no, nothing of relevance ever came from that didn't spur the outbreak in LA. Instead, the entire world apparently was always going to be zombies, and Sam B just barely does shit with zombies in LA, even almost turning into a zombie himself. But I digress. With that exposition of both sides of the genetic coin out of the way, we can now discuss the major differences of Pathogen HK and the autophage, and more importantly, how they coincide with each other. The autophage was never an infecting agent nor a global illness, a just core DNA strand of all Homo sapiens. Rather than being a biohazard, it is and will be an inevitability. While we wouldn't experience it naturally within our lifetimes, pockets of the human population on Earth would suddenly turn across the globe, causing bands of infected to start attacking the non-dead to bolster their numbers. Over the course of 10 to 20 years, most likely by the early to later 2170s, would all of mankind succumb no matter what. Even if they aren't bitten, scratched, or infected, they will just turn, except for the immune, and more so, the Newmans. Adversely, Pathogen HK isn't an inherited will from the void century of the dead. It is a freakish anomaly infesting the brain. On the surface, Pathogen HK is basically the textbook definition of a zombie apocalypse with the bonus of creating special variants. But due to its nature of being a prion, it is possible the neurodegenerative nature of Kuru, and therefore Pathogen HK, could very well be the accelerant of the autophage. Pathogen HK infects the brain and attempts to do something similar to its predecessor Kuru, but due to its cross mutations with other viruses, it instead instantly triggers the part of the nervous system the autophage lies dormant in. It was both the revelation of the autophage and it being triggered early by Pathogen HK that Dr. Reed saw to reconstituting the island-borne virus for other purposes. Turning it into what he called HK1, he dispersed the agent in Los Angeles in order to do two things. The first, to create large testing grounds out of a highly populated area to guinea pig the people there and see how it reacted differently from the original pathogen. The second, much like Reed's adoptive daughter he infected at birth, he wanted to weed out any immune people within the population, which was a 1 in a million chance per person to create more blood for vaccines and cures. And the only way to make this was to infect a shit ton of people, thus creating a chaotic populace of humans, zombies, and aptly titled hybrids called Newmans, while releasing a modified form of a zombie virus from Benoit on a more drastically populated city like LA is insane. You could have done it on a different island if you really wanted to do this. You could have done it on another island because this series is called Dead Island, but I see what they were going for with the whole quarantine, making it into an island, but I am rambling, going off script. Dr. Reed simply said this: he was killing millions to save billions. Pathogen HK is simply a weaker form of unlocking that dormant monster that is in all of us. Kinda like when Kyle drinks a can of Monster. And by doing so, we as a species have more of a chance to prevent our extinction at the hands of the autophage down the road. It is why Dead Island 1 and Riptide have special infected that are not seen again in Dead Island 2. Like the Ram, while specials like the Butcher and Screamers change drastically. Thugs become Crushers, Floaters become Slobbers, and new specials begin to arise as the LA outbreak spread out more, especially in the DLCs, with the Clotter being more of an omnipresent being. On top of all of this, Pathogen HK was merely a mindless trigger that made a generic zombie apocalypse. Pathogen HK was simply just a dumbed down version of what was to come, with the modified version of HK1 triggering a more pure form of the autophage. And eventually, when the autophage that was being unlocked by HK1 created the hive mind intelligence of this pandemic, it would see to repurposing all organic matter. Think of it like this: HK1 unlocked kind of the full potentiality of the autophage. It's the Pathogen HK on a flood grave mind level. It is stronger, more versatile, telepathic, influential. Even Pathogen HK's immune like Sam B could succumb to HK1 and the autophage. People that were immune to the original virus, this was a much more stronger and varied version of what has now come to the world. You're either a Newman or you're not, and you're going to become a zombie. Pathogen HK can be used as a tool of war, as seen with its origins in Benoit and Palanai. That's the furthest its extent could get. But with it triggering something more, the autophage, spurred by HK1, would have the ulterior motive by the consortium to create a new race, the Newman race. If you remember, the original reason this autophage was even discovered was because this upper echelon of people were trying to figure out a way to keep themselves alive, to make themselves superhuman. If it wasn't for the research and what happened on Benoit, none of this would have been possible, except eventually our great-grandchildren meeting their inevitable fates in 136 years if it weren't for Benoit and the hell that broke loose from its native population, and the fractured entities that wanted to use the virus for multiple different purposes, but none fathoming what it means for our future. Pathogen HK was a generic zombie virus that was really just a trigger for what the autophage was, but it was a watered down, mindless version. While the autophage itself, it might have otherworldly properties considering it can be sentient, use biomass, and make basically a hive mind intelligence. Humanity within the 4 tribe of Papua New Guinea and technically those in Benoi had accidentally unlocked a super speed highway to get to this zombie virus quicker. That is the connection between these two viruses, and using Pathogen HK and variants of it will be kind of necessary to prevent the total extinction of mankind. One zombie virus to stop the zombie genetics within all of us. That wraps up this jumbled look at 2 zombie viruses that, on the surface, sounds like they have nothing to do with each other. But in actuality, it's like a comparison of, I don't know, let's use something like Dragon Ball Super. Let's say Goku is the autophage, and Pathogen HK is his granddaughter Pan. Goku could not unlock Super Saiyan God at all or early without using a Quarter Saiyan or other Saiyans to spark his latent potential. He had the capability to do it, he just needed weaker versions of the Saiyans. I don't know, same thing here. Bad analogy, but at least I'm trying, right? We will be diving into the 2017 film The Cured and discussing what a world with a zombie cure would be like. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below, and feel free to chip in a buck on Patreon, YouTube channel memberships, or donating during my live streams over on my second channel, WSG Streams, where we stream Left 4 Dead 2 versus matches live weekly with friends and fans to have your name featured on this list. That is already scrolling on by. Thank you to Chago, aka Quick Flicks, for editing this video together today. Check him out for some awesome recaps. And until next time, I'm Zackass, aka Wow Such Gaming. Never forget to stay happy, stay healthy, and most importantly, stay wow. And also, hoodoo you voodoo, bitch!
Hoodoo, you voodoo, bitch. Drink blood like a vampire without warning. Hoodoo, you voodoo, bitch. Stand up. Sam B got the thing that go bump in the night. Whoa.